Hey, can you hear us by the way? Everyone on the Zoom? Phenomenal. Thumbs up. Great. Okay, so we don't have very much. Are you pretty much ready, Charles?
Yeah, I'm good to go whenever.
All right. Okay, so real quick. Hey everyone. So the only news we have is next week is the going to be the project presentations, and we will also be announcing the Game Jam winners. Also, if you guys want free stickers, we have the free stickers up front this week that we lost previously. Um, that is pretty much it. So without further ado, our beloved TigerDev alumni, Charles, will be talking to us today.
Hey everyone, am I coming through clear, nice and good? Okay. Yeah, I'm Charles. I have a slide presentation I'll put up that is like 99% finished. I forgot to throw the animations in. So there were like some punchlines in here that might have been funny if there were actually animations to go with them, but I forgot to do that. Oh, I see we're in the cool meeting room this time. Nice. This is the meeting room I would rather go to rather than the one in the engineering student center. Don't tell anyone. I thought this one was cool because there was some verticality. Okay, I'm going to present this. Let me share my screen. Oh, could someone enable screen sharing? If not, I can just talk. That's fine too. But it looks like it's disabled for me. I just noticed that.
We got you.
Thank you.
You have host privileges now. Don't abuse them.
Ooh, okay. Nice. I'll share this and then I have not used Google Sheets in a minute. Or here we go. Is this looking good for everyone? Thumbs up. All right, nice. Okay, so I have a presentation. It's called Game Production in You and some other lesser known but important facts about making games from me, someone who was in your shoes like 1 year ago to the day. So let's just hop in. I'll give a quick introduction. Who am I? If you don't know me, and I might see some new faces in the crowd I don't recognize yet. I'm Charles Painter. I am an Auburn and more importantly, TigerDev alumni, and I work as a production assistant at Epic Games on Fortnite. So that's where I work now. I work from home in Montgomery, Alabama. The office for Epic is in North Carolina, but I still work from home. The next question I always get, this is where one of those funny animations would have happened, is if I can give you free V-Bucks. I can't, but thank you for asking. It is funny every time someone asks me that. I laugh every time. And then the last question is, what am I going to be talking about? That is, I want to talk to you about two things. The first is I sort of know the audience and I know what I would have liked to hear about if I was in your shoes. And that's getting into the games industry and sort of my advice I have for you guys about actually getting in and what that takes. And then the second thing I want to talk about is what production is in terms of game development, because I work as a production assistant and it's sort of a buzzword and maybe a misunderstood word. And I kind of want to talk about it, especially to this crowd. So I'll go ahead and kick us off with my story. So I came to Auburn in 2016 and I always knew I wanted to work in games. And, you know, I lived in Alabama. I couldn't really afford to go to school out of the state. I was like, well, I guess like if I want to make games, I got to learn how to program. I'll be a software engineer at Auburn because that's like the engineering school. So I go to Auburn to get a degree in software engineering. And for about 2 years, I just kind of like went to classes and came back to my apartment and gained weight and played video games. I didn't really do much. I was like, oh, I'll learn how to program and then I'll get a programming job right out of college. I almost included a picture of Dean Hendricks up here too, but I kind of worried. Um, but that was sort of me. Like I came to Auburn, I took the CSSE classes. Uh, I hated taking physics, and I was just your average normal student. But I heard about TigerDev, and I always was sort of curious about it. So when I was a sophomore or a junior, it was in the fall of 2018. I like tiptoed into a meeting because the president at the time, Christian, had this huge PR boom where he had put posters up everywhere. I was like, oh, okay, I'll go this time. And I got there and I was really excited about it. And I said, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm actually going to make a game here. So I set out to make a platformer game as a team leader of this game called Consumo. And oh, whoops, there we go. Skipped a page for a second. So I worked together with a team of people who were also super new to making games. I believe like everyone on the first semester team, it was their first semester at TigerDev and their first time ever trying to make a game. And there are some Consumo alumni hiding around in here right now. I see Jackson and Cooper. I can't really make out anyone in the crowd yet, but um, I worked together with this really great team of people, and we put together a prototype of our game over 2 semesters. The first semester, we just kind of learned how to even work in our game engine. And the second one, we actually put a game together with some new members. But what did I do on the project? That's sort of what I wanted to highlight. I got together with this great team of people, programmers, people who had great design ideas, artists, and I kind of came up with like the basic idea and the pitch for the game. It was like a platformer where you cooked food for adventurers and they fought off enemies. But I wasn't really the programmer on the team or the artist or the musician. I didn't really do any of that. I was the team leader, and I definitely put a lot of work into the game, but it wasn't, I couldn't really pinpoint a specific thing I had done at the end of the day. When I looked at it, I was like, oh, well, Sub drew all the characters and Seth did all the programming and Jackson did this. And I was like, what did I do? Which kind of got me thinking after a while. So I stayed with the Consumo team up until I was this club's president in the fall of 2020. And then I graduated and I got out of here. After I graduated and while I was sort of getting ready to go, my friend and fellow TigerDev alumni, Christian Graham, he reached out to me to help out with a game he was working on called Grief Elm. So I helped with that game. I did creative writing for that game. And then after it launched, I graduated and I worked part-time with Grief Elm's publisher, which was a little indie game publisher called Thornet. Grief Elm was our only game at the time. And so I helped support Grief Elm after it came out, and I helped them scout for new games to publish. And during this time, I also developed my own little game called Sleepwalking, which I kind of did all on my own. I commissioned some people to do art and music for it. Cooper in this club also did some art for the game. I'm rotating my mouse around this one particular old man sprite he made. And I was on the job hunt during this time. So I went to college, I did TigerDev, it was great. And then I graduated and I was working part-time for like $10 an hour, like 10 hours a week with this indie publisher. And I was on the job hunt, and that was just every day, like working on my resume, submitting to the like 3 games jobs that I could find. It was rough. It was a really unfun time for long months, just submitting and getting declined. And then one day, after applying to a bunch of jobs and not hearing back, I got in contact with a recruiter from Epic, and I actually got an interview. And it went well. And then they were like, oh, sorry, actually, that job doesn't exist anymore. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll, go back to being sad. And then they called me back and they're like, wait, actually, the job does exist. I guess someone messed up. And hey, let's interview you again. And I did. And the interview went well, and I started my job there as a contractor. So it's not a permanent position with Epic. It's a 1-year contract. It could turn into a full-time. But that's what I've been doing for the last half year. As of tomorrow, I will have been working at Epic Games for half a year. So that's where I am right now, which, okay, it's cool. Like, that's my story. But what does that have to do with any of you? Like, why, it's a cool introduction if you want to know who I am, but why does it matter? And I think it does. There's a couple of reasons why I think my story has some value. And I want to preface this by saying that my story of getting into games is not supposed to be a template that anyone should follow. If you're interested in making games or working in games, I'm not saying, hey, do exactly what I did, but, lead a team and work with an indie publisher and secure a contract job. That's how you get into the games industry. No, the truth is there's tons and tons of different ways to get in, which is not something that I think is discussed as much as it should be. But the 2 points I want you guys to think about is that the first is that 1 year ago, I was like exactly where you guys are, sitting, listening to devs come in, working on games at school. So I'm really not the smartest or the brightest guy you'll ever meet, and I managed to pull it off. And I know a ton of super duper talented people at TigerDev who I have like tons of faith would kill it in the games industry. So, you guys can do this. That's the number one thing. And the number 2 thing is that I have some tips and tricks from my story I'd like to highlight that I think are good for anyone who wants to make games. So that's what we're going to go over. Some tips from me, the fun issue before we talk about production, about what to do if you want to work in games. Here's tip number 1, and it's the most popular one. It's make some games, right? So you've probably heard it before. It's easy. Like, if you want to get into games, make games. It sounds really simple, and it is really simple, but it's kind of hard too, right? But the biggest piece of advice for anyone, and I really do mean anyone, is to involve yourself and get some games under your belt in terms of making games. You need the experience. The good news is you're in a great place to actually do that at TigerDev. So I have like these images on the side. These are all games I've worked on. Not all of them were done at TigerDev, but a lot of them were, and a lot of them were done for game jams. I know Ezra announced that there's going to be judging for a game jam sometime soon. That's awesome. When I got to TigerDev, we were working on Consumo like basically the whole time I was there, one game. So game jams were a great opportunity to go out and with a group of friends or even new people, like sit down and be like, okay, we've got X amount of hours, we've got this theme. Let's come up with something kind of small and make it. And that was a really fun thing to do at the time. And because of those, I actually have more games that I've worked on that I got experience from doing that. So game jams, making games in general, that's a huge, huge thing. And then my sort of caveat to this tip is that don't be afraid to make and finish some like bad games. And bad is kind of a strong word here, but what I mean here is like make something and finish it, and give it your all in whatever discipline you go into it in, and have it out there. Like it could literally be going on YouTube and looking up a Sean Spalding tutorial on how to do X or Y and making it, right? A lot of people are like, oh, well, that's like, okay, but you just followed a tutorial. But you did, you learned something. You have a new tool in the toolkit there. Make some crappy games, make like a ripoff of Frogger or Pong, you know, don't shoot for the sky and try to make like the next Elder Scrolls or something along those lines. It's cool to want to make those and it's cool to work on those. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have ambition, but be okay with making small things that you can finish. Finishing games is a really important skill in the games industry. Take it from me personally. It's really, really hard to finish a game. Like it's incredibly, incredibly hard to finish a game. So if you can make something and finish it, even if it's small, that's something that not a lot of people are able to do, at least not easily. So it's a big achievement. So that's my first piece of advice. That's like the general, like everyone will tell you this advice is to make some games. And when I say make some games, I don't mean like sit down by yourself and program and design the art for and the music for a whole game. You can just get involved with people who are making games, right? If someone's doing a game jam or something along those lines and you work in art or music, make the characters, make some sound effects, make some music, and get in there and get into the process and add things to your toolkit. That's sort of what I mean. So get involved in making games and get involved in finishing some games, even if they're crappy. That's my generic sort of, I guess, like fortune cookie game advice there, but it's really helpful. People who make games look for people who know how to make games, even at an entry level. My second piece of advice, and the one I want to focus on, is that making games isn't just programming. Now, I know my audience. I know there's probably a ton of programmers in here, and programming is awesome and totally necessary. And I have no intention of downplaying that. You can't really make a video game without programming. Like it's pretty much impossible. Someone has to do the programming legwork somewhere. So if programmers want to like take a quick bathroom break while I'm talking about this real quick, they can. But I want to stress this. There are a lot of different paths into game making. And this is something I learned while I was at TigerDev. I have a list here of things just off the top of my head. So of course there's programming, but there's design, right? And design manifests in a ton of different ways. Where I work, there are designers for all kinds of different disciplines. There's people who design the user interface. There's people who design the user experience. So not just what you see, but like what, when you click on that, where does that take you and what does that make you feel? There's people who design the gameplay, and there's people who design the effects that the gameplay has on the environment. Fortnite's huge. There's thousands of people working on it. There's designers for all kinds of things. There are people who design the way that the promotional materials look. There's also writing, right? Writing is huge in games. You could be a narrative designer and write dialogue. You could write material for the game that's going to be presented publicly. Ever been on Steam and like notice that there's a lot of things written about a game? Like, I don't know, like there's a game like Blue Box coming out and you'll go on the Steam page. It'll be like Blue Box is an upcoming award-winning 3D roguelite Metroidvania. Someone had to write all of that. And if what you read kind of catches your eye and makes you like be like, oh, okay, I know everything I need to know about this game. That's a skill, a hard skill, a pretty cool skill. So if you're a writer, there's a ton you could do in games. Writing that stuff is called copywriting, and it's a pretty popular skill. But of course, there's also writing within the game itself. I'll kind of speed myself up here, but visual art, I'm sure we can all think about where that's used in games, right? Music and sound, project management, business, marketing. These are all skills that are necessary to make and finish games. You know, you might not look at someone who's a business major and be like, okay, like, what do you have to know about making games? But people who have business majors know a lot about getting an idea from a concept to a product to something that actually goes out for people to play. And that is something that might not, you know, be the best use of time for designers and programmers to be thinking about, right? They've got to think about programming the game and designing it. They might not have time to think about like, well, how do we get this in front of people to make sure we have enough money to even make it? So those are skills that go into making game. It's all necessary. When I was at TigerDev, I mentioned as I was working on Consumo, I was kind of like, what did I really do? Like I did a little programming, a little art, a little sound. But I realized what I was doing was, as a team lead, was sort of organizing the people and making sure that the project itself was moving forward. That was kind of my job, right? To make sure that like I came up with the idea for it, but then the real meat and potatoes of it was really developed by the rest of the members who did the art and most of the design and the music and the gameplay. And of course, we all talked about it as a team, but I was getting the meetings together and getting the reports together and making sure like, okay, like, is this like, hey, is this finished? Okay, we can put this in. Are we gonna have time to do this? Probably not. So we'll do this instead. And I realized I was having a lot of fun making this game, but I wasn't really doing what I thought I would do when I got to Auburn, which was sitting down and programming like press space bar, event jump. That wasn't really what I was doing. So being a programmer isn't the only path into games. It is a path, and it's a great path. And if it's what you like to do, if it's what you want to program, and what you want to do is program, like consider that a part of this list. Like of everything on here. I really do want to say I'm not trying to downplay programming at all. But for everyone in here who maybe is like, you know, I might not be a programmer, but I still want to make games. There's tons of different ways you can get in. And I guarantee you there's almost always a way you can use what you're skilled at to make games, which kind of leads me into the next thing I want to talk about. So there's my tips. Number one, make games. Number two, know that you don't have to be a programmer to make games. And that leads me to sort of the second part of this talk, and it's what is production, right? So I'm a production assistant, but what is it? And that's a good question, and it's a little hard to answer because it's a really loaded word. Like if you take producer and you just remove it from gaming as a context and try to define it, good luck. Like there's like a billion definitions. I am a production assistant, and I have a super difficult time like explaining what just a generic producer is. I can tell you what I do at my job, but production and being a producer, that's kind of tricky. In my own words, in the context of making a game production is the discipline of making sure that a game gets made and that the people making it are taken care of. And that is a pretty generic definition, but that's what it means to be a producer. Your job is to make sure that, you know, the game gets made, and your job is to make sure that the people making the game have what they need, and they're in a healthy work environment, and they're able to sort of do their best. But like, okay, really, let's get a little bit more specific about it. So producers or production assistants, or there's other words for them, associate producers, production coordinators. They're the people who act like links between all the other disciplines we talked about earlier in game making. So you have your programmers, you have your artists, you have your designers, you have your musicians, you have your business folks, you have your marketing folks, right? And they all do things, right? They all kind of work in their own lane to an extent, but of course they can't all be working in isolation. Like they have to know what each other's doing, and oftentimes like their work is so wildly different from the other that, you know, they don't really have any visibility on what's going on there. Producers are the links, the nexus point between all the different disciplines in a game. They're the people who put together, like producers are the ones who communicate between the teams. If your programmers say this and they need this from design, then it's the producer who acts as that facilitator between the two disciplines there. They make sure that the everyone has what they need. So if your programmer is like, whoa, wait a minute, I can't do this, I don't have access to this, then that goes to the producer, who can take that to whoever can get them access. If is everyone on the same page? Do we all know what we're doing? The producer is the one who makes sure that information is dispersed throughout the team when relevant. And of course, their top priority is to make sure that what we're working on actually gets made, is moving forward. This is kind of the universal definition of what a producer is, but it takes on a lot of forms depending on where you go and what you do. Like at Epic, where I work, producers, like, it's very, very heavy on project management from the ground level. So like, I'm talking with the devs, I'm talking with the team leads, I'm talking with the designers and the art folks to make sure that, like, hey, we're trying to make this, here's our timeline. How are we looking? Okay, we're here. Okay, that's an issue. I know who I need to go talk to. This person. Hey, we're having this issue. Oh, okay, it'll be resolved at this time. I'll bring it back. That's sort of my day-to-day life, is making sure that what we're working on gets moved through. And in Fortnite, you know, there's a billion things being added to the game every day, and each of those things usually has a team of people devoted to working solely on it. And that team usually has a producer, right? So the team is made up of the programmers, the designers, the quality assurance people, who I just realized I neglected to put in the slideshow. But that is, I'll probably talk about that a little bit at the end. So all of that has to go into the producers there to make sure that all of that's sort of working at its most efficient, while also being sort of a line of defense for the people, right? Like, the producer is also the person who's like, hey, we can't do this. Like, John, like, he's got too much on his plate to work on this right now, or this probably isn't going to make it. Sometimes as a producer, you have to kind of make the tough calls, right? I saw a video one time that says, as a producer, you have to be invested in in making sure the game comes out, not in the game itself, which sounds like pretty harsh, right? Like, no one wants to hear like, hey, wait, I'm invested in the game. But there's a grain of truth to it. It's that your job as a producer is to make sure that everyone's hard work gets realized as a finished product, which sometimes involves sort of separating yourself from the work itself in a weird way. Maybe that means like, oh no, this feature that we thought would be really cool, you know, we don't have time to do that and finish the game. It's those kind of hard decisions that a producer has to make. At other studios, things might be a little bit more creative for producers. I know of some places where producers have more creative input, right? Like, they're in the meetings and they're all like, I mean, I don't know, guys, what if we added like green fire here? That would be pretty cool. Sometimes producers like carry that kind of weight. It depends on where you work. At Epic, that's not really the case. At Epic, like someone will say something and I'll be like, hey, let's ask the designers, because that's not my job, and it's not really what I specialize in either. I'm not a designer or an artist or a programmer. I just help those people out. In other countries, producers can like be the same as directors, but we're not really going to talk about that because we live in the United States. But if you ever hear about producers from like somewhere like Capcom or Nintendo, that's usually different than producers here in the US. So what if you're interested in production? Whether or not you're interested in it, it's always going to play a part in your game making projects to some extent. It can be a little small or it can be very big. If you're a solo dev working on a game in your own time, you have to wear all the hats that come with game development. That includes designing, programming, art, music, and it includes production. Production is making sure that you get your game finished. But of course, it's kind of the black sheep because it takes on a lot of different forms in different places, and it doesn't really seem to have like one hard skill set attached to it, right? Like, I didn't get a degree in production from Auburn. I got a degree in software engineering. But it's sort of like, you don't meet someone and you're like, oh, he majored in game production. That doesn't really happen. Maybe that happens at like those game those game development colleges like FIA. I'm not actually really sure. My advice, if you're curious about game production or if you want to know more about it, is to be a leader at TigerDev and lead a team. That's going to basically like throw you right into the fire of being a producer on a game. So things I had to do while I was a team lead at Auburn included planning out the game's progress, right? Like, okay, we want to do this by the end of the semester. And about a month in, we want to have this. And about 2 months in, we should have this. So we have time to do this. That's creating and tracking milestones right there. Creating presentations on the updates, right? Producers have to do that kind of stuff all the time, is give an update on where our work is. Like, hey, we've done about this much. We plan on doing this in the future. Here's some things we might get to. Here's some things we might not get to anymore. Team leaders at TigerDev, I remember giving like, I think it was once a month presentations on the game. I still have all of them saved, where we go through and highlight all the new things we added and where we plan on going. and managing team members. Producers are basically managers. They help manage people. So that doesn't mean like producers aren't like bosses who boss people around. They facilitate people. They make sure that like, hey, everyone have what they need. Oh, you have like an opening, you don't know what to do, I can help you out with this. It means getting to know people. That's really what I like about it, is the people aspect of it, learning their strengths and weaknesses, and facilitating them and making sure they're doing the best they can do. And all of this sounds like really cool on paper and fun and maybe even a little easy, but once you get into it and you're like 9 layers deep into a project and you're working with all these people, it's a lot to keep up with. It's a lot to track, and it's definitely not for everyone. Like some people, I know plenty of people who are like, no, I don't really want to do that. I want to program my thing and finish my thing. And that's awesome. I think that, you have to have people like that, but you also have to have producers who are like, hey, I got to make sure this guy's able to program his thing and do his thing without worrying about a fire that's going on over here. So that's my job. And that's what I think is pretty cool about it. It's the teamwork aspect. That's what I really liked about TigerDev. I had tried making games before in my free time, and I never was able to finish it or even really get started. I'd start and I'd go and I'd be like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I'm never going to be able to do this. I don't have time. Maybe I don't care that much. But I got to TigerDev and I met people and I talked about ideas. And I just remember one meeting, this guy came in to like our second meeting, and we were just chatting about things. And I was kind of getting that same feeling of like, is this even going to work? And he said, yeah, last night I opened up a tutorial and I made this little platforming prototype. We could start from here. It was just little guy that could move and jump around. And I remember playing with him being like, whoa, he actually like made this. This is like a basis for a game. It blew my mind. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. There's actually something here. And it sort of sparked a flame like, hey, we can keep working on this. And those kind of things keep happening on a team, right? Someone will, if you're working well as a team, someone will, you know, pull weight over here and pull weight over here. When everyone works together and specializes in something, that's really cool. As a producer, you just need to make sure that people get in their lane and they're able to do their thing with minimal like problems or issues. And for me, I find it really fulfilling to say like, hey, like everyone got really like everyone has what they need. They're working and we're making some cool stuff happen. Because I'm not the most talented programmer or designer. Like if you play any games I made by myself, you can absolutely tell that just after playing them for a few seconds. You're like, huh, okay, there's some issues here. But I'm not ever really the smartest person in the room, but I really like working with the people who are the smartest people in the room, right? And helping them out. And if you feel the same way, maybe production's something you could try out as well. So in terms of where you are at TigerDev and how production can help you there, my biggest suggestion is to, take it pretty seriously. If you're a team leader, and you're worried about like, is anyone actually going to come with me? Like, is anyone actually going to work on this project? The best way to, I feel like, maintain and keep people is to show that you actually care about it. And of course, I know you're all students and you've all got a ton of homework to work on and social lives to live. I kind of miss that. That would be really cool right about now. So I totally get that. I'm not telling you to make this your life, because that's my secret third game dev tip, is to make sure that you live a healthy life and don't like throw your soul away trying to get into the games industry. Because if that's the case, I can promise you your soul is all like, your mental health is always going to be more worth it than getting into the games industry. As cool as it is, take care of yourself. But if you show that you care about it and you put effort into making sure the progress is going to be a success, that doesn't like, people will notice that. And that'll help a lot. I was really lucky because I got to work with like some amazing people on Consumo who like really, really cared. And their enthusiasm increased my enthusiasm. And I think it made a positive feedback loop that kept us on track. And so the best way to get that started is to try to give it out and to show that you really care about it. And to go the extra mile. Like, I can't really come at you with any hard skills about production because they're all kind of like normal things, right? Like, keep track of what you're doing. Say, hey, I want to have this done by this day. Let's make sure, let's write it down and make sure we have a calendar and make sure we're scheduling things. Make sure we're looking at something saying, this might take me forever. This might only take me a few days, right? That's all kind of general common sense issue tracking. But in terms of the soft skills you can develop right now, it's, being enthusiastic, planning to the best of your ability, caring about your game, and making sure that, you put your best foot forward. That's sort of my TigerDev advice. And that's all built upon the advice of make a lot of games and, understand that there's tons of ways to get involved with making those games beyond just programming. Or you can even say there's more ways to make games than writing music for them. There's more ways to make games and doing art. There's always more ways to make games than one, and you need to find the way that fits you. That's sort of my big thesis statement here. For me, that way was production. That way was working with people and driving projects forward. But for you, that could be a ton of different things. So if you're interested in production, I hope this talk has been good for you. If you're, sort of curious about what it is at all, I haven't been very specific, but I think the truth about production is there's not much very specific about it. And if you're not interested in production and you're interested in some other discipline like programming or art, or even testing a game, which is one of the most important disciplines there is, then find ways where you can make that your niche on a team, right? Do the thing you're good at, even if it takes you some time to find that out, and specialize in it, and you can sort of enhance a team with your own ability there. Or if you're making a game by yourself, you can try to put on all the hats. There's really no one cookbook way to do it. Just like how I said, there's no one way to get into the games industry. The best thing to do is to just practice and hone your skills, and then find what you're good at and follow that path in the best you can. But that's really all I had. I know I probably talked at like 100 miles an hour, but that's sort of my big presentation and what I would have liked to have heard if I was in your shoes at the time. So I'll toss it back over to Ezra, for him to talk now. But thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Charles. Really, we appreciate you coming to talk to us about this. I'll be sure to throw some of the games that Charles has worked on with TigerDev. The Consumo demo is like a true gem. So hopefully you guys can check that out. I'm sure that they mostly still work. But yeah, we don't actually have, I don't think, any other announcements or anything this week. So be sure to come next week for project presentation number 2. And yeah, hope to see you guys then. Thanks again, Charles. Wait.
Whoops, my bad. Thanks for having me, everyone. And good luck. I'll be in the TigerDev Discord snooping around. So send me those games when they're finished. I want to see them. All right. Bye, everyone.